You are listening to the Bases Juiced podcast with John Source and Brian Goudsworth.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Bases Juiced podcast. John Source here with Brian Goudsworth here, July 24th, 2016, about a week away from the 2016 Major League Baseball trading deadline. Brian, always a lot of good stuff going on, always an exciting time. The week leading up to the deadline, obviously, there's going to be a lot of teams still kind of in that area. Do we sell, or do we buy, or do we stay put? And it's going to be a fun week.
It is. The trade deadline's always fun because, it's the one sport, it seems, where you get a lot of activity around this time. The other sports usually don't get a lot of splashes right before the deadline. Baseball is a very active time. Even a couple weeks before the actual deadline, teams are starting to make some moves. And then once that August 1st, in this case, rolls around, that's where you get a lot of activity.
We saw the first domino fall last week. We talked about Drew Pomeranz to the Red Sox, and really what is a very thin starting pitching market, and Pomeranz was one of the top guys out there. And if a team is looking for pitching and everyone's looking for starting pitching, thing is, like I said, there's so many teams that are kind of not really sure where they're headed. But Brian, let me tell you, there are two guys out there, and we heard yesterday this whole look. If we did this yesterday, this would be different because the White Sox situation with Chris Sale. I mean, talk about a bizarre scenario. The whole cutting up of the uniforms because he didn't want to wear the retro uniforms the day he pitched. I mean, we talked about that whole Drake LaRoche situation at the beginning of the year, and now that's the second most bizarre thing that happened in the White Sox clubhouse this season so far. But if they decide to move a guy like Chris Sale on the market like this, they can get a lot back for him.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. Now, we've heard, the reports, the asking price is astronomical, as it should be, for a guy who's not making that much money, all things considered, who's a legitimate ace, who's left-handed, who's still pretty young, and is controllable for the next few years, I believe, through the 2019 season. So those are all reasons why the White Sox would want a ton in return for him. And it's a team, one of those that, you kind of talk about being in between, not really know where they're headed. The White Sox kind of fall in that category and certainly would benefit from getting a haul of prospects for Chris Sale. It's just a question of whether a team like the Rangers, who have expressed interest, or maybe it's the Red Sox, someone like that, actually have the wherewithal to give up that much to get Chris Sale to town.
Well, those are two teams that I think have the pieces. If they want them, they can go get them. And this is a player that I've talked about for the past couple of years. The White Sox are an interesting team. They went out and spent big money on the free agent market a couple off seasons ago. Last season it didn't work. This year they make the moves. They bring in Todd Frazier, and they got off to a fast start. And I talked about the LaRoche thing. With me, I think clubhouse chemistry is important, and I thought that may hinder them early on, but it really did not have an impact because they got off to a fast start out of the gate, and they were in first place for about the first month and a half of the season. But they've kind of come back to earth a little bit, and I mean, there are just some teams out there that, like you said, are in that middle spot. So if you're going to kind of sell, to me, I think why wouldn't you trade Chris Sale, like you said, for those reasons, and even Jose Quintana say, well, there's no reason I think why they shouldn't just tear it down. And I kind of view it somewhat similar to the Royals situation when they had Zach Greinke a couple of years ago off the Cy Young winning season. They got Lorenzo Cain and Alcides Escobar in that trade. They don't win the World Series in 2015 without those guys. So the way I look at it is they tried to win with this core group of guys. It's not working. And Chris Sale, like you said, he's 27 years old. He's under control for this year and 3 more years through 2019 at a very reasonable price for a left-handed pitcher of his caliber. I mean, really the most dominant left-hander we've seen arguably since Randy Johnson.
Yeah, especially in the American League, talking about that. But, it'll be interesting to see what the White Sox do. We mentioned some of the pieces that could become available. Todd Frazier's hit a lot of home runs this season, but hasn't hit for a very high average. They have some other guys in the bullpen like Zach Duke from the left side who they could get something back for. So, it'll be interesting to see. Right now, though, if I had to say, I think they're going to hold on to Sale. And certainly after yesterday's antics, or whatever you want to call it, a very bizarre situation there with the uniforms, not wanting to wear them, for for his game yesterday and getting sent home. I don't know if that necessarily hurts his trade value. Probably not, because most teams know the kind of guy he is and the kind of talent he is, and if they really wanted to, would give up what's necessary to get him. But I just think the White Sox are going to say it's too steep of a move to make at this point. We're going to try to make the playoffs, stay in the race, and whether they will or not remains to be seen, but I think they hang on to him.
That's interesting. I think, like I said, I think they're going to trade him, but that's just what I think. And again, with Sale, I just think the value for pitching out there, for starting pitching especially, like a left-hander like that, look to your north. Look at the Cubs. Teams that have teared it down before, really, restarted to rebuild. And really, you're an afterthought in your own city because, the Cubs have just taken over and they're one of the more dominant teams in baseball. And the White Sox, the average home attendance the past 5 seasons, 24th, 28th, 26th, and 26th. So, I'm sorry, what do you have to lose? No one's going to the games anyway. So, it just, to me, I think you can get a lot back for Sal. I think someone will give up the 5 players. If the Rangers want to trade Joey Gallo and Jurickson Profar, among other players probably as well, I say do it. If the White Sox want to get 5 players, I think if that's what it'll take, I think someone's going to make the move. I think he's throwing his last pitch with the White Sox. He can't do anything else to up his value any higher. Why wait for him to maybe get hurt or ship him away when he has 2 years of control? When you're going to get less than when he has 3 years of team control at a very fair price. So I think he's as good as gone, heading in a different direction. A team that never does that, though may do it this year, Brian, is the Yankees. And we hear Aroldis Chapman may be on the move relatively soon. Again, this is never a team like we talked about last week that really sells players, but let's face it, another team that is not in the mix. You know me, and when you're not winning, you need to, it's not fun at all, but if you're not in contention and you're in the middle, tearing it down and rebuilding it works. It's proven to work. The Astros did it. The Cubs did it. The Braves and Phillies are on that track right now. Kansas City, you could say, did it as well to get to this point. But the Yankees, Brian, will be interesting to see what they do. But Chapman's out there. Beltran's probably out there. Maybe Pineda, Navaldi, and the guy I think has the most value is Andrew Miller. We'll see what they do. But I say make it happen. So I say make the move and look toward the future, because I think that's in their best interest right now.
Well, right now it seems like the guy who's most likely to be traded is Chapman, and we've kind of heard about that now for several weeks now, since he's a free agent at season's end, and conceivably if the Yankees wanted to, they could sign him as a free agent this offseason, but right now get a couple prospects, whatever they get for him from a contending team like the Nationals or the Cubs or someone like that who's shown interest in him. Now it seems like the Yankees are inclined to hanging on to Andrew Miller, which, as you pointed out, he's probably the guy that gets you the best haul of prospects of any of them. So we'll see if they move him, but it seems like they may want to hold on to him. And then, of course, you have Carlos Beltran, and maybe something happens with a couple of the pitchers, Evaldi or Pineda. But, I see the Yankees moving Chapman for sure, probably moving Beltran. The great season he's had, you'll at least get a medium-level prospect of some sort from a team for him, and then we'll see, how they work it toward the future.
It's going to be an interesting week for them because, like I said, this is not a team that really ever goes into full sell mode. And like you said, if you trade Chapman, you could sign him back as a free agent if you really wanted to. I would personally trade Andrew Miller. That's just what I would do, but doesn't look likely at this point. But we'll see how it plays out. But one team, Brian, that we'll see what they decide to do. Again, this week is going to be telling for a lot of these teams that are on the fence here. Is the Royals, who are out there 500 right now, and I've read that this homestand, which they're currently on, they've lost 2 out of 3 to Cleveland, and now have split the first 2 with Texas, a very good Texas team. You have the Rangers again, and then you have 3 with the Angels before you go down to Texas for 4. This homestand is going to be very telling. So you're 2-3 right now. You have the Angels coming in, who I don't think is a very good team. We're going to see what they do this week, but where do you kind of see this team heading, Brian?
Yeah, this one really kind of stumps me, to be honest with you, because I've heard the reports coming out in recent weeks of the possibility of the team selling, which I can't say it's not a bad idea for several reasons. The state of the farm system right now is not very strong, and so to get some prospects back and sort of, get some talent back injected into that system, which was the biggest reason why they won the World Series, all the players coming up from the farm, and now it's just depleted with the trades they made last year to improve their club for the stretch run and making it all the way to the World Series and eventually winning it. But now at 500, 8 games back in the division of Cleveland, they have Detroit ahead of them as well. Here's the one guy, if they do decide to sell, Wade Davis, to me, is the guy that would have to be moved, because in an age where the bullpen is so valued, this is a guy who you could make the argument's the best reliever in baseball with what he's done the last couple of years. You would get an enormous return for that guy, and we know how closers are. They just don't last for long periods of time. So I would say if the Royals do decide to sell, which I don't know if they will, and if they don't, I couldn't blame them, because they should go for it again this year. Their window is small. They're coming off a World Series victory. But to me, Wade Davis would be the guy that gets you a big haul in return.
That's the guy that was on my mind as well. But I think what they're going to do is, if they decide to sell, they're not going to throw away next year too. So you're not going to see a lot of guys like Hosmer is not going to get moved.
Cain.
Right, probably not Cain either. But some of those guys who are free agents this year, Volquez, Morales, Hochevar, those are the kind of guys you could see move. But I agree with you with Wade Davis, because you could just put Kelvin Herrera, just plug him into the ninth inning, and Davis is you would get him for another year after this year. So, I mean, we've seen it with this team in the past with Joakim Soria. You have this great reliever. Do you flip him? Do you turn him into something, or do you play it out? They played it out with Soria. He blew his arm out, and then he walked as a free agent and got nothing for him. Now obviously he's back, but I think it would be interesting to see, because especially if the Yankees decide to keep Miller, and say the Cubs get Chapman and Washington still is looking out there. Let's just say if they'll give you Trey Turner and Victor Robles, maybe someone else. It's hard for me to say no to that trade if I'm the Royals. And then maybe you have a shortstop. If you get Turner, let's just say hypothetically, Escobar you could move on from. Maybe you can get something for him. I don't know. But I think the dominoes start to fall. Like you said, the farm system, let's face it, it's bad. So you do at some point have to kind of look toward the future without gutting it this year. They're kind of in a similar spot they were 2 years ago with the record, but they also weren't 8 games out of first place behind a Cleveland Indians team. They're right in the mix there. So Chester Cuthbert's having a very nice year at third base. Mike Moustakas, we know, an all-star last year. He's done well in the postseason, but Cuthbert's had a very nice year. They have Hunter Dozier coming up at third base. Do you move on from Moustakas? And if you do, maybe, it's hard to trade now because he's out for the season with an injury. You have him for one more year, and he's a Boris client, so he's not going to sign an extension. But you look at his career numbers, this is really not a guy who I think you're going to say next year he's a guy you let go, because you have the guys. But do you maybe look to move him at some point?
You definitely could, as you point out with the job Cuthbert has done. He looks like a guy who can play at this level and play third base. He's done a really nice job hitting over 300. He's hit some home runs. So they haven't really lacked in production there at third base with the injury to Moustakas. But the other way to look at it is, if given the choice to pay Hosmer or Moustakas, my personal choice would be Hosmer. Now, he's probably going to be more expensive than Moustakas, but if you sign him, then you probably have to let a couple of the other guys go, and you have a ready replacement, as he's proven this year in Cuthbert. So I would certainly explore that possibility.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too. I agree. I would sign Hosmer over Moustakas as well, but Hosmer's going to command a lot of money, whatever it's going to be. We'll see a year from now. But if you do sign him long term, Moustakas is gone. Davis is probably gone anyway, because they're not going to pay a lot for a relief pitcher. But one guy who interests me is Lorenzo Cain. And if you sign Hosmer, you're not going to sign Cain. And I remember this offseason, I remember hearing out there that they wanted a 6-year deal. The Royals didn't want to do that, and so they gave him a 2-year deal leading up to his free agency. So if they want to keep Hosmer, and say they do, do you maybe look to trade Lorenzo Cain right now, this week or this after the season, to kind of get players back? Because you have a lot of outfielders. You have Alex Gordon, he's not playing great, but he's not going anywhere. You have Paul Orlando is playing well. You have Gerard Dyson. You have Brett Eibner. You have Raymond Fuentes. You have Jorge Bonifacio knocking on the door. I think you can look to maybe move Cain while his value is there, because, he got hurt. Nothing you could do about that, but I kind of fear that last year might have been a career year from him.
Well, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, though, if they were to trade Lorenzo Cain at some point, it would probably be next year as opposed to this year. It's very hard to move a guy who's currently on the disabled list. His value's just not going to be as high as it otherwise would. And if you want to get the most in return, even though next year will be his walk year after it's over, I think that might be the time to do it, depending on where the Royals stand. I would want him to come back and be a part of their lineup, hit third, and try to take another swing at this year with Lorenzo Cain, because he's still one of their best players when healthy.
Right, yeah, there's no doubt about that. He was arguably third in the MVP in the American League a season to go. Now let's recap these three teams: White Sox, Yankees, and the Royals. I see them all being somewhat sellers in some way, shape, and or form. Maybe not. I think the White Sox will sell pretty big. Yankees and the Royals kind of maybe in the middle. What do you think, Brian?
I think the White Sox will move a couple of pieces. I don't think it will be Sale and Quintana. I think they'll hang on to them, and maybe move a couple of the guys in the bullpen, maybe Todd Frazier, although I don't necessarily see that either. I think they're going to be hesitant. So the White Sox, I think, sell some, but not the big guys. The Royals, I think, will not choose to sell. I just think too much pride coming off a world championship. I think Dayton Moore is of the mindset, we get some of our guys back, we're taking another run at this thing. So I don't think they will choose to sell. And the Yankees, Chapman, I think, is going to be gone, and I think overall it's going to be selling for the Yankees, just because I think that's what Brian Cashman's vision is, and I think he's going to get his way, and the Yankees are going to understand that their team just isn't good enough to be, a playoff contender this season, and they're going to try to get what they can to improve the young players in their farm system and be a better team going forward.
Now, do you see the Royals maybe buying this year, or do you not really see that?
I think they could buy something, but it'll probably be small. They typically made a small move, not counting last year, because we know they made the big moves with Cueto and Zobrist, but the year before, a Josh Willingham, some kind of bat off the bench I could see for a team that hasn't really produced offensively much this year. Yep. As far as starting pitching, maybe they add something, but I don't think there's going to be any big move. I could see a small guy like a bat off the bench. That's what I would envision.
Yeah, those are good points, Brian, and I kind of agree with you when you're saying, they're not going to make a big move. The way I see it, if they don't sweep the Angels next week, I say sell some guys off, because if you can't sweep the Angels, I mean, come on now, that's just not good. But it really shows you how amazing it is to get to the World Series 2 years in a row. So we'll see what they decide to do there.
And that's a good point to bring up, because all the energy they've expended the last 2 years getting to the World Series, I've heard people say on MLB Network and the analysts and all that this team just may starting to be out of gas. And, can you really blame them? How many extra games they played the last 2 years, especially this year, the fact that they've gotten beat up. Some of their key players have been out of action for most of the season, like Moustakas. Gordon's been on the DL, Lorenzo Cain, and others too in the pitching rotation. It's just been kind of a tough year, and coming off 2 years where they played so much extra baseball, I just think they may be tiring a little bit.
Well, like I said, wouldn't be opposed to it, but we'll see what happens in the coming week. Now, another team, Brian, let's talk about the Mets here, and another team that's really an interesting spot, because, to me, it's just I know they view themselves as a contending team, but do you really think they're going to go out and make a big splash or make really any big moves in the coming week?
No, I really don't. It seems like the consensus on this team is if they do add anything, it's going to be marginal. And the amazing thing is with the Mets is it may actually be a pitcher, which if we said that before the season, it would have been, oh my gosh, what has gone wrong? Well, what's gone wrong is Matt Harvey is out for the season, didn't pitch well before that, but now that's a big hole in the rotation, one that right now is being occupied by Logan Verrett, and it remains to be seen how long he can hold down that fort. So whether it's some kind of innings eater to put in at the back end of the rotation, Clay Buchholz's name has been mentioned as a guy who's fallen out of favor in Boston, but maybe too they add someone in the bullpen. Now the bullpen's performed very well this season. Familia's saved 50 straight games. He's been great, even though he allows a lot of base runners. He gets the job done. Addison Reed, you could argue, has been even better in the 8th inning. He has just been terrific all season, and other guys too, like the Blevinses and the Hansel Robles. But maybe they add another guy to put in that late inning part of the bullpen to kind of strengthen that unit. But it's just funny with the Mets how we probably assumed, oh, if they do anything at the deadline, they're going to add something to boost their lineup. Well, now, with the issues in the pitching rotation, it seems like Sandy Alderson's going to have to add an arm of some kind, and before the season, that seemed like it was the one area the Mets weren't going to have to address, and, well, here we are, and times have changed.
Yeah, well, they sit 6 out of Washington in first place. Marlins are ahead of them 4.5 games there. They lost last night to Miami, and again, these are big games for them playing your division. And yeah, you're right. I mean, with the Mets, you think the pitching is going to be there, but I always say you never have enough pitching. And again, 1 year all these guys are great, and then a year after, Harvey's out for the season. Syndergaard and DeGrom have been good, but they've kind of been up and down, on and off, with some injury question marks here and there. Matt's, you never, with the injuries there, he always has that concern. And Wheeler's hasn't, come back. So it's, you think you have pitching, and then, these things happen. So, and then the rest of the team, they're feast or famine offense. Defense isn't great. It's all right, but it's not great. And once this pitching doesn't click, the rest of the team is going to go through a rough patch. And that's what we've seen here from them, a couple times this year. It's hard for me to say, really, because they really don't have anyone to sell off. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't think they're going to buy. I think they're going to kind of just stand pat, really, and just let it play out.
Yeah, well, and it's been kind of a strange season. They got off to the great start in April, and you're thinking, wow, they didn't miss a beat after that run in October, making it to the World Series, and they're hitting a bunch of home runs, and the pitching is clicking, and it's like, wow, maybe, they can get back to the World Series. But since the month of April, they've pretty much been a 500 team, maybe a game under. They just haven't really clicked since that month, and guys have really cooled off. Neil Walker, it's kind of gone unnoticed after his rip-roaring month of April where he was tearing the cover off the ball. His batting average is down now under 240. He's in a big slump right now. Wilmer Flores, it's a struggle for some reason to get him in the lineup. The guy's been one of their most productive hitters, but you have Reyes playing third every day. Loney's done a serviceable job at first base, and Terry's kind of picking his spots, getting Flores in there against the lefties, but frankly, the guy should be in there every day. He's one of the few consistent producers in the middle of that lineup with Cespedes. Granderson is Granderson. He is what he is at this point. Darno hasn't really produced since coming back from the DL. They've just got a lot of shaky positions around the diamond. Duda, we don't know when he's coming back. Obviously, they haven't had David Wright for the majority of the year, so it's been kind of a struggle offensively. Yeah,
it's just so Mets to have a guy like Flores who's one of your better performers right now, and you can't get him in the lineup. I mean, there should be no reason why he shouldn't be playing. Again, I said it a million times, third base every day. But that's just, what I think about that.
And then here's the other case, too, with the Mets is Conforto. Right now, he's kind of in no man's land. He's back from the minor leagues, but Lagares is playing most of the center field now. Now, they're saying they want him in center field because Miami's a spacious outfield, and Conforto they don't want to put in center field. Well, Conforto is suddenly going to be the center fielder. The guy never played that position in the minor leagues. He was drafted as a left fielder. We thought that's what he was going to do, but the complication is Cespedes now doesn't want to play any more center field because he's gotten dinked up, so he wants to exclusively play left, which means, it's either Lagares or you have to move Conforto with Granderson occupying right field, and it's kind of messing everything up.
Yeah, well, and number one, Conforto is not a center fielder. That's number one. Number two, Yoenis Cespedes is a 1 year, $30 million headache is all he's been for this team. Obviously he's carried their offense at times, but they don't need him. They don't. You could say okay, his batting lineup, but it's just not worth it because if he's gone, Conforto plays left, Lagares plays center, Granderson plays right, everyone's happy.
But the team's not going to score any runs.
No, right, but it's kind of getting back to the same old Mets we've seen before last year. Really, the first few months of last year, it's just. I mean, there's so many just like things, like what, like Reyes is back now. I mean, okay, great, but you needed a third baseman, and Flores goes on the run, and Reyes is, coming up the minors, and now Reyes is there every day, but Flores should be playing there. But no, I mean, you got Reyes, so he's got to play. It's just typical Mets. I mean, it's back. Same old Mets.
Well, and another note is, and we've talked about their struggles hitting with runners in scoring position, that they're such a feast or famine lineup. Well, Asdrubal Cabrera, who's done a nice job offensively and defensively for the most part, but he is now hitless in his last 31 at-bats with runners in scoring position. That basically sums up what the Mets have been this year.
Not just this year, really. I mean, they just can't get a clutch hit. They can't manufacture runs. It's been the same thing since they had Reyes in his prime leading off.
The amazing thing is Reyes has come back and he's hit a couple home runs, but hasn't consistently gotten on base, stolen bases, doing the things that Reyes does. He's hit like 3 home runs, a couple triples, but he's hasn't really elevated the team that much.
Yeah. I mean, it's really all you can say. It's the Mets are back, and you hope next year you get the pitching back healthy. You have Harvey. You hope you have Wheeler.
Right, and he's another story.
Yeah.
We thought he'd be back by this point, but he hasn't even started his rehab assignment. They're targeting now September 1st as a possibility for him coming back, so you have to pretend that he's not even going to contribute anytime this season.
I mean, at that rate, there's no reason to rush him back if he's taking him this long. Just give him the year off. Well, let's see. Do we think these guys are going to be moved? Let's start with Jay Bruce of the Reds, and I think he's going to get moved. Where he's going to go? I mean, San Francisco's, out there. A lot of teams looking for outfield. Kansas City, you hear the name floating around out there. Maybe the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers are, they're still in the mix there. So I think Jay Bruce, I mean, the Reds are going to move him. I think he's had an all-star year, obviously. He's been there. Really had a bounce-back year this year, but I think Jay Bruce is going to be on the move.
Yeah, I think so, too. The interesting thing is, if he does go to the Dodgers, he's pretty much a right fielder, so then, in that case, what happens with Yasiel Puig, who, they've talked about even possibly moving themselves. Talk about interesting cases. I mean, you could spend a day talking about Yasiel Puig. It's just a guy who doesn't make a lot of sense. With the talent he has, he should be so much better, and yet he's basically a part-time player at this point with the Dodgers.
Yeah, well, I personally think they should get rid of him. I think he's just a cancer to that team. Like you said, the talent is there, but it hasn't clicked, and I think a change of scenery will help him and the Dodgers as well. Yeah, you're right. That makes sense. Maybe even Cleveland. So, but I think he gets moved. Another guy who probably will get moved, Jonathan Lucroy. I think will get moved at some point. Another very good year with the Brewers, a bounce back year from a down season a year ago. A lot of teams you could use a quality catcher. Texas Rangers come to mind. We heard the Mets out there, in past weeks. I don't think that's going to happen now. But I think Lucroy gets moved, and if you're Milwaukee, he's done a lot for that team. He's a model guy, top notch, really catcher in the game. But they're going to get something nice for him, I think.
Well, there is a perfect team out there for Jonathan Lucroy, and I've seen a couple of the baseball guys mention this team, and it makes too much sense. It's the Cleveland Indians. They have gotten no offensive production from their catchers all season. Yan Gomes wasn't doing anything before being injured. Now he's on the DL. So they've got, Chris Gimenez and Roberto Perez. Come on. They could use a guy like Jonathan Lucroy, who would enhance that lineup big time, and that's pretty much the only weak spot in that lineup right now. You put him there, you could make the argument they are the most complete team in the American League going into the postseason. So that's the team I would have my eye on for Jonathan Lucroy.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I also saw they're content with their catching situation, that they are more focused on bullpen help, which they could use as well. But again, that makes sense as well. They have a lot of good young players, a lot of outfielders that they can move. Bradley Zimmer, Clint Frazier, some other guys. Naquin's been up; he's been doing well. So they have some young players they could They can I think they're going to be a team to watch this week. Let's now talk about the Rays and their pitchers. A couple of interesting guys there. A lot of guys are going to call on Chris Archer, on Matt Moore, on Drew Smiley, maybe even Evan Longoria as well, third base there. How about Chris Archer? Do you see him get moved?
That's really a tough one.
It is a tough one.
I don't know what the Rays are going to do. They're obviously a last place team. They've had a dreadful season. Usually they compete a lot more than this. Even in years where they're not real strong, they hover around 500, but that just hasn't been the case this year. I don't know how they view Chris Archer. I think they're going to chalk this up as just a bad year, and they want this guy leading their rotation, and I don't think they're going to part with him. I could see them moving a Matt Moore, maybe a Jake Odorizzi, but Archer I think they're going to hang on to. As for Evan Longoria, I don't see any chance that happens. There's just certain guys who are faces of the franchise, and, I don't think they have the guts to move Evan Longoria. At this rate, he gets you decent prospects in return, but I don't think the value of what he brings to that franchise is going to be matched in a trade. I just think they hold on to him and probably move Matt Moore or Odorizzi, and I say keep Archer.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's a good point with Longoria as well, because his value's not, he's not the elite third baseman he was, a couple of years ago. So, give me one bold prediction for the upcoming week. One, maybe a big move that people don't expect to happen, but you think will happen. My bold prediction, I want to say Chris Sale gets traded, but I don't know if that's overly bold anymore. I think he gets moved. I think the White Sox will sell. I don't know if they'll trade him and Quintana. I think Sale gets moved, though. And I like doing these crazy things. Brian touched on it before. I think the Royals trade Wade Davis. That's something I think they didn't do it with Soria, and they're in a different spot now where you need a good closer, but they also I think see the value, and they have Herrera to pitch the ninth inning as well. So if they do sell off some pieces, I think they'll move Wade Davis. And they'll go into 2017 with Herrera as the closer. They're still going to have Soria, even though he's had his ups and downs this year. Hochever's not going to be there, but you'll have Soria and Herrera next year. Maybe you make some moves to get some guys in there. Maybe you'll see Miguel Almonte in the bullpen role at some point. He's kind of struggling in AAA now in the rotation, but my bold predictions, 1 and 1A, Chris Sale and Wade Davis get traded in the coming week.
Yeah, I just thought of something that may happen. We kind of touched on it, but the Dodgers are one of these teams that kind of makes bold moves. I remember a few years back the trade with the Red Sox to get Adrian Gonzalez, Josh Beckett, and Carl Crawford, and that came completely out of the blue. Nobody was expecting that, to take on all that money. That trade was kind of unprecedented. It actually came after the regular trade deadline too. That was like in August that move happened. But I'm going to say that the Dodgers decide to pull the trigger on Yasiel Puig and move him to another team. As far as who it's going to be, I don't know. Someone who's going to be willing to take what's kind of a headache. But I'm telling you, if you get him right, he could be a game changer for a team. For whatever reason, it hasn't clicked with the Dodgers, and I say they are going to, as a result, trade him. And that's something that I don't think has been talked about a whole lot, but I think the Dodgers are going to make that kind of a move, and that'll be my bold prediction.
Yeah, well, that's a good one, and that's something I've said. If I were running that team, I would have traded him 3 years ago or whatever. It's definitely a bold prediction. I don't know if it'll happen. Like I said, I would do it, but I don't know who would want to take that, because that's one of the biggest ifs in baseball. If this guy can get his head on straight and become the player that he's capable of, because the talent is there, but I really just don't know if he's ever going to figure it out. But that's just what I think. So very interesting. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks.
While the Mets, as we said, lost to the Marlins 7-2, it was a rough night for Jacob deGrom, who takes the loss. Jose Fernandez got the win, and a big night for Giancarlo Stanton. Had 4 hits, including one of the farthest home runs anyone's ever seen, which he can hit them just a very long way. So the Marlins get the win, and the rubber game coming up this afternoon. The Mariners put a hurting on the Blue Jays, 14-5. They rocked R.A. Dickey, 2 homers and 7 RBIs for Nelson Cruz, including a grand slam, and Seattle has taken the first 2 there. Pirates evened up their series at a game apiece with the Phillies. They win last night 7-4. Giants outlasted the Yankees in 12 innings 2-1, both RBIs driven in by Mac Williamson, including a home run for him. The Orioles have taken the first 2 against the Indians. They won yesterday 5-2. Good start for Kevin Gausman and 2 homers for the Birds, including Mark Trumbo's 30th of the year, which leads all of baseball. Nationals edging the Padres 3-2. That was a walk-off win for Washington on a game-winning triple by Stephen Drew, of all people. Reds over the Diamondbacks 6-1. Brewers beat the Cubs 6-1 to even up that series at a game apiece. The Tigers and White Sox suspended their game after 8 innings due to weather, so they pick up that one in the 9th today before playing the finale of their series. The Astros knocked off the Angels 7-2 behind Colin McHugh and 2 Evan Gattis home runs. Minnesota outslugs the Red Sox 11-9 to take 2 of the first 3 in that 4-game series. Dodgers beat the Cardinals 7-2 to win the Kenta Maeda. Rangers knocked off the Royals 7-4 behind Cole Hamels and a homer from Nomar Mazara. Rockies over the Braves 8-4. And the Rays lost to the A's out in Oakland by a final score of 4-3. So for today, Mets and the Marlins with Steven Matz on the mound as the Mets try to take the series from the Marlins. Miami counters with right-hander Jose Urena. Giants to the Bronx to take on the Yankees. Jeff Samardzija gets the start against Nathan Eovaldi. Mariners and the Blue Jays wrap up their series in Toronto. 2 left-handers, Wade Miley and J.A. Happ. Diamondbacks in Great American Ballpark taking on the Reds. Brandon Finnegan gets the ball for Cincinnati. Zach Godley for Arizona. And we mentioned the Tigers and White Sox will pick up their game 2-10 coming up today. Indians and the Orioles from Baltimore. Corey Kluber against Vance Worley. The Twins and Red Sox play the finale in Boston. Tom Malone against Rick Porcello. Phillies are in Pittsburgh. It's Vince Velasquez against Jameson Taillon. Christian Friedrich for the Padres. Lucas Giolito for the Nationals in our nation's capital. The Cubs have John Lester. They're in Milwaukee against Junior Guerra. Anibal Sanchez for Detroit. Jose Quintana for the White Sox. Tigers and the White Sox from Chicago. Tim Lincecum gets the ball for the Angels. They're in Houston against Mike Fiers. A.J. Griffin, Edinson Volquez, the matchup Rangers at the Royals. Blake Snell, the young left-hander, gets the ball for the Rays against Jesse Hahn for Oakland. Atlanta at Colorado, Tyrell Jenkins opposes Tyler Chatwood. And finally, Sunday Night Baseball tonight, the Dodgers and the Cardinals. It'll be Scott Kazmir against Mike Mayers, who makes his debut for St. Louis.
And on Monday, we have the Rockies taking on the Orioles in interleague play. Jorge De La Rosa against Giovanni Gallardo. Padres taking on the Blue Jays. Another interleague matchup in Toronto. Colin Wright against Aaron Sanchez. Tigers taking on the Red Sox at Fenway Park. Justin Verlander against to be determined. We'll see what the Red Sox decide to throw there. Another to be determined, this one with Miami as the Phillies take on the Marlins. Jeremy Hellickson against to be determined. The Cardinals taking on the Mets at Citi Field. Carlos Martinez against Noah Syndergaard. To be determined gets the ball for Arizona as they take on Milwaukee and Chase Anderson. The A's and the Rangers and AL West matchup in Arlington. Daniel Mengen against Martin Perez. A battle in Chicago between the Cubs and the White Sox on the south side. Jake Arrieta against Miguel Gonzalez. Yankees taking on the Astros in Houston. Michael Pineda against Dallas Keuchel. Angels and the Royals battle out in Kansas City. Hector Santiago against Ian Kennedy. And the Reds will battle the Giants in San Francisco. Anthony DeSclafani against Jake Peavy. So that's going to do it for the Bases Juice podcast today. Thank you everybody for listening. Look forward to what happens in the coming week. We will enjoy it, so hopefully you guys do too. So take care everybody.